problem is I speak too loudly. But if it's better, if you want me to use a microphone, I can, if it's clear. Okay, so I feel like Frank Sinatra. I did it. I've never used this before. But if it's easier for you, I'll use it. Because usually my problem is I speak too loudly anyway. Students complain, you yell. I yell because I think it's easier for you to hear me, obviously, and it makes me slow down because I get very excited about the political science, foreign policy, nationalism, international relations, war and peace. Typically when I'm teaching this class, I start off with a motivational lecture. I told you I'd stay away from you, so I have to stay away from you right now that I don't have my mask on. But you and I are privileged and cursed and privileged, because on your shoulders and on my shoulders is a new situation confronting Homo sapiens. We are the species Homo sapiens, right? And do I want to try to write things when I'm speaking at the same time? Homo sapiens is, and of course, now we have the old familiar problems of using these markers that might or might not be dark or fresh or not. So Homo sapiens is our species. And, we really shouldn't be a separate species. We should be considered a subspecies along with the chimpanzee. The chimpanzee, the chimpanzee? We share, I see different numbers, between 90 and 98% of the same genetic material with chimpanzees, you and I. We are basically chimpanzees with very highly, overly developed forebrains, this part here. But we're still primates. And we are genetically programmed in our software to feel emotions, hatred, disgust, joy, love, fear, and to see the world around us and people around us in terms of whether or not they are threats to our well-being, broadly understood, or opportunities for my well-being, broadly understood. Fight or flight is how this is described, right? Imagine 100,000 years ago on the steppes of Africa, because Homo sapiens began to move out of Africa about 50,000 years ago. Neanderthal already was in Europe, right? A tribe or a group of Homo sapiens comes to a water hole, a place where there's water. And where there's water, there's animals to hunt and eat, water to drink. So water is really important. And they come over the hill and they come in sight of the water hole. And there is another group of hominids, of beings, of primates that look sort of like humans. And I see them in my group, and I'm the leader, and they see me. What do we do? So that I will take a rock and smash their skulls, kill their babies, really simplistic ways. And associated with stereotyping is emotion. Stereotyping and affect, stereotyping and emotion go together. And we begin to talk about these stereotypes, right? What makes us different from primates is that we can have identities, a self-identification, not just with my family, my tribe, but with France, Korea, Japan, China, Russia, that have hundreds of millions of people in them. And I am concerned about that community's well-being. Is it being oppressed by the Germans? Is Korea being humiliated by the Japanese? And feel very strongly about what happened to the Korean comfort women 80 years ago, although you never met any of these Korean comfort women. You don't know them. Have you ever talked with them? Do you know any? No, but you feel probably as a Korean very strongly about the humiliation and degradation of Korea as symbolized by the forced enslaved sex slavery of the Korean women, the comfort women, so-called. And you feel very strongly about that. Even though you'll never meet those people. That's what makes Homo sapiens different from chimpanzees. We can imagine communities that are very important to us in terms of who I am. I am Ben D. Dominichez. I belong to the group D. Dominichez. I belong to the group of men. I belong to white group. I belong to European group. I belong to Catholic group. I belong to the professors group. And I belong to the American group. And being American, if I'm a typical Homo sapiens, is going to be more important to me than being Catholic or Ohioan from Ohio State or being male. You might make fun of the Pope. You say, Pope Francis is a foolish man, ha, ha, ha. And I might go, I might lose peace of mind. You made fun of the Pope. But if you make fun of Donald Trump, you say, I hope Donald Trump dies of COVID-19. My heart is likely to beat a lot faster. I'm likely to have a stronger reaction to that because America is a much more powerful self-identity community for me than being a Catholic or being from Ohio or being a professor. And we talked about this in the first weeks. You were constructed into being a Korean. I was constructed into being American when I was born. The software was uploaded into our brains by our parents and our surroundings. That's what makes us Homo sapiens unusual, that we can upload this really complicated software, but still driven by emotions and tendencies towards stereotyping. And so to get back to this point that I made at the beginning of the class, for the first time in the history of our species, of Homo sapiens, and we've been around, 200,000 years, about 200,000 years, right? For the first time since 1945, Homo sapiens has developed the capacity to destroy itself, to eliminate itself with nuclear weapons. The atomic bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Before, war and conflict was kind of useful, right? Homo sapiens erased Neanderthal. Well, bred with Neanderthal, and Neanderthal went away because Homo sapiens was better. It was better at fighting, it was better at killing, it was better at making technology for fighting and killing and living. Neanderthal made technology. Homo sapiens does it better than Neanderthal. And what's the evidence? We're here and they're not. War and violence served a Darwinian, Charles Darwin, evolutionary function. If we, however, now do not learn how to control our DNA programming to engage in stereotyping and affect, emotion, we will destroy ourselves. And this is the first time we have faced this problem ever in our history of our species. And it's only since 1945. And you and I, but particularly you, because I'm an old man, are the ones that have to figure out how to create a world where this predisposition towards war is short-circuited, is blocked. And some of you are in my European Union class, and the European Union is all about that, how to prevent new wars in Europe and in the world, hopefully. It's a peace strategy. That's why it got the Nobel Peace Prize in 2012. Among people that were slaughtering each other as recently as 1945 and are still slaughtering each other now in Armenia and Azerbaijan, if you consider them part of Europe. And, you know, Armenians will tell you, yeah, we're European. Ukrainians are killing Russians. Russians are killing Ukrainians in Ukraine. So even in Europe, people are still dying from war and nationalism. Nationalism associates with stereotyping and emotion, with affect and emotion and stereotyping. They all go together. So, so what do? How do we make the world a better place? We've been talking a bit about American nationalism, about America as a nation state, about how the US president unintentionally has become a living, breathing, live symbol of the American nation. Something that, you know, Koreans have an issue with, because Korea is not a nation state. It's two states dividing one nation. Each state claiming to speak, we are the genuine Koreans. We in Seoul are the genuine Koreans. Pyongyang says, no, we are the genuine Koreans. You Seoul Korean government, you're a puppet of the Americans, and you're a puppet of the, and they say other things. I won't go into it. You know, the stereotyping involves insults, ugliness. You know what they say about South Korea. Right? That we, North Korea, we are the living true flame of the embodiment of independence for the Korean nation under our great leader Kim Il-sung and his offspring. So you Koreans know about having complicated emotions about what does it mean when Moon Jae-in tells me what to do. I mean, how did the Sarangjil Church portray Moon Jae-in? He's a puppet of Pyongyang, right? But in America, your typical American assumes the president of the United States is not just the president of the United States, he's the big abuji. They don't call him the big abuji, but that's emotionally how they feel about him. He represents their primary terminal self-identity community. He's not just the leader of the government, he is the leader of the American nation. The way Vladimir Putin claims that he is the leader of the Russian nation. And Xi Jinping claims that he's the leader of the Chinese nation. There's not really that much competition like there is in Korea, but who speaks for the Korean nation, Kim Jong-un or Moon Jae-in? So we talked about the president, now we're talking about the Congress. What is the role of the Congress in this system which, particularly because of war and the Cold War, we have seen that the US president has become this all-powerful, it's described in the book, right, last week. The US president is the most powerful person in the world, the most powerful person on the planet. And that's because of World War I and especially World War II and especially the Cold War. The belief that the Soviet Union was a Russian version of Nazi Germany, and the Congress of the United States gave all of this decision-making authority to the US president, so the US president, you know, in this diabolical enemy image that I described, stereotype that I described in previous classes, that the US president had to be given the freedom of action to be able to move quickly and effectively wherever the evil communist conspiracy attempts to spread its worldwide plan to conquer the world under the agents and spies of Moscow, beginning with Mao Zedong and Kim Il-sung. That's why Congress didn't complain too much when Harry Truman, President of the United States, sent American soldiers to fight a war in Korea. There was no declaration of war. According to the U.S. Constitution, the Congress is supposed to declare war. The Congress is supposed to declare war. The Congress has never officially declared war since World War II. Not in Korea, not in Vietnam. It authorized use of force in Iraq and Afghanistan, but it has never said, we hereby declare a state of war between the United States and the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. It never did that. It just said, U.S. President, you can do whatever you want to do, whatever you think is necessary to deal with the terrorist threat. That's all they said. Why? Because the belief that going back to the Cold War, that Stalin and his successors are devious, incredibly rational, single-minded, imperialist expansionists working through their spies and agents, because we have nuclear weapons now, so you can't act like Hitler. You can't just invade countries because we could have a nuclear war. So they work through their agents and henchmen, supposedly, like Kim Il-sung. He was a puppet of Stalin, supposedly. He wasn't, but that's how I was taught to look at Kim Il-sung. The first thing I learned was Kim Il-sung was an officer in the Soviet military. In other words, he was just some puppet henchman that Stalin picked. I make you the leader. They didn't talk about, when I was your age, that Kim Il-sung and his family were actually Korean nationalists. He comes from a family of Protestant Christians, because Protestant Christianity is associated with nationalism in Korea and China. Like Sun Yat-sen was a Christian. Did you know that? Who founded modern China? Chiang Kai-shek, leader of the Kuomintang in China, he was a Christian. Syngman Rhee, he was a Christian. Because it was associated with the United States, and the United States was a balancer against China and Japan and Russia. But when I was your age, we never learned that. Kim Il-sung, all I was told, he was an officer in the Soviet military, as if Stalin just picked him and said, okay, you're going to be my puppet in Korea. No discussion of Korean nationalism, Korean resistance against Japanese occupation. Oh, no. Nationalists tend to stereotype. They see the world in overly simplistic ways. So, what do we do about this president, this overly powerful president? And so, we can talk about, how does Congress, or can U.S. Congress, overcome, or counteract this tendency of American nationalism to give too much power to the big aboji, the president? Can it do that? It failed in the Cold War. It gave the U.S. presidency all of this power in security and economic negotiations, because it was thought that this was necessary to lead the free world against the communist, aggressive, imperialist threat. So, what role does the Congress play in this system, which differs from other systems in that institutionally, the U.S. Congress is not directly controlled by the president? Angela Merkel is Prime Minister of Germany. She's Prime Minister of Germany because she controls the German parliament through her party and her alliances with other parties. Her party is an alliance with the Social Democratic Party, and in that way, they control a majority of the votes in the German parliament, the German Bundestag. That's why she's prime minister. If she can't control a majority of the seats, she's no longer prime minister. Donald Trump is president until he dies or he loses re-election. Right? Whether or not he controls the Congress or dominates the Congress doesn't determine ultimately whether or not he is the president. So the Congress is more autonomous from the presidency. And let's take a more positive orientation on this, because I'm painting a very gloomy and depressing picture of the role of the United States government in running our world. And so, this is the chapter notes from chapter 5. Oh, but before we talk about this, we've got to talk about some other organizing issues here, right? And that is, we have to, okay, you've done the attendance, great. So let's go back to assignments and click here. And so you see, I'm asking you to submit another paragraph by Wednesday. And what's the question here? To South Koreans, the Republic of Korea's constitution more appropriately positions South Korea's legislative branch of government regarding South Korean foreign policy making than U.S. Constitution's role for the U.S. Congress legislative branch of government. So in other words, I want you to compare, if you're not Korean, compare with Belgium. Do you think other countries have created better constitutions than the United States? The United States Constitution is old. Stephen Hook, Professor Stephen Hook, who wrote the textbook, he says the U.S. Constitution is pretty much not changed very much, has not changed very much since the U.S. Constitution was written 240 years ago. South Korea, much more recently, adopted its constitution. Europeans, they have a stronger tradition of changing their constitution, right? The French are under their, Fifth Republic? Belgium, I don't know enough about Belgian history to know about how the Belgian constitution has changed in the 20th century, but Belgium's a younger country than the United States, right? It was created, in 1830s? You're Belgian, right? Oh, you're French. Any Belgians here? Oh, okay. So we used to have some Belgian students. Yeah, so France has had its 5th constitution adopted under de Gaulle, President de Gaulle. Does that mean that your constitution is better because you've learned the lessons of the failures that the Americans and others have had? You Koreans, your constitution looks more like the French Constitution than the American Constitution. You have a hybrid executive with a president and a prime minister like they have in France. Although Korea doesn't have a second house. France has 2 houses of Congress, of legislature, right? An assembly and a Senate. Korea has 1. But Korea has a president and a prime minister like France. And of course, when they're writing the constitution for South Korea, they were looking around and saying, well, we'll borrow that, and we'll borrow some of that, and we'll borrow some of that, and we'll borrow some of that. Well, we don't want that. We don't want that. We want that, but we don't want that. So the Koreans decided they don't want a second house in their legislature. So, like I said, there's no right or wrong answer to this. But like I tell my students, right? The people that wrote, the white men who wrote the U.S. Constitution, they were writing the Constitution in rebellion against the British monarchy, the British government, the British crown, the British king. That the executive authority represented by the royal governors of the British king who ruled in the 13 colonies of Great Britain in North America, they represented the British king, and they were too powerful. They were overriding the participation rights, the rights of the people living in North America. And so when they wrote the Constitution, the people that wrote the Constitution, the founders of the American Republic, highlighted the power of the Congress. The Constitution begins not by talking about the power of the president. Article 1 of the Constitution gives the power and authority of the Congress. In other words, Congress is numero uno. Congress, yay! And then Article 2 is the presidency. And then Article 3 is the Supreme Court. Again, the notion was that the president was kind of like an elected king, right? The president would simply preside, right? Calm down, I'm George Washington. You put your lives in my hands in the war. If I had lost the war, you'd be dead now. So, be nice to each other. Don't be jerks. You say, yes, George. Yes, George. Yes, George. That's what a president is supposed to preside. And if necessary, lead the military in the war. Like kings were, George II was the last British monarch to lead his military into battle. The father of the King of Britain when U.S. had their war for her independence. And then George Washington did at times, when he was president, I think at least once, he got back on a horse and led a U.S. military force against a rebellion. Because that's what executives did in the 18th century, right? So, okay, and then of course the midterm is due on Monday, and so this is the midterm question, and your paper should not be longer than 500 words, and it should use and cite information from at least 3 different chapters, from chapters 1 through 6 of the course textbook as a requirement of the essay. And make sure you use and cite specific information to support your argument here, right? Did I show this before? Maybe I didn't. Let me see if I can, I might be asking too much here. I don't want to see if I can find the criteria, grading criteria. Maybe it's too much work. I wanted to show you how I'm going to grade your final draft, because you're going to send your paper to me, and then I'm going to write comments on it and send it back to you. And I'm wondering where I put the grading criteria. And if I don't show it to you here now, I'll show it to you later. Oh, yeah, there it is. So you'll send me the paper. I will send it back to you with my comments and using the track function, the TRK function in Microsoft Word, like I do with your paragraph sometimes. And then we're going to meet each of you individually with me, and I'm going to talk to you about your paper and my comments on the paper. And in the past, when I met with you, when I met with the students, I would ask you to come to my office. But since we're now in pandemic time, we get to use Zoom, which would be fun, because I think you can do that really easily in Zoom. I can show you your paper the way I'm showing you this file, and we can talk over Zoom while you're at home about my comments on your paper, and then you'll revise the paper and send it back to me, and I'll put a grade on it. And so this file describes how I will grade the paper, right? What do you need to do to get an excellent grade? The paper should be good enough that I can understand it, obviously, but it doesn't need to be perfect in terms of the style of English. It should, of course, use and cite specific information from at least 3 chapters. If you don't use and cite information from at least 3 different chapters, I'm not going to give you an A. You're not going to get an A. So make sure you use and cite specific information from chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. At least 3 of those chapters. Don't make any wrong statements. Don't say that, Woodrow Wilson was president when America dropped the atomic bomb on Japan in 1945. If you say that Woodrow Wilson was U.S. president when U.S. dropped the atomic bomb on Japan, how can I give you an A? Right? And an excellent paper says something interesting and new, supported with evidence. I mean, I like reading a paper. When I read this paper and I go, hey, yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that before. Okay? And then a B paper is good, but it just summarizes information. C paper, that's what happens when you don't use and cite information from at least 3 different chapters, and so on. Okay? Very straightforward. Any questions? Yes. Yeah, that you send me on Saturday, and then I will spend Saturday writing my comments on it in the TRK function, the track function. I think you can have it here. It's in Korean, so I can't really, where I make edits and it keeps the changes so you can see what I changed and replaced it with, and then send it back to you. So you're going to write 2 drafts. Okay? Yeah. Up to 500 words, right. I don't encourage it. Maybe 10% more, but no more. And why do I require that? I told you, first off, what I want to keep repeating. I'm not being a bully. I have to do the same thing you have to do. I've got to write papers too, and they have to be graded, and they have to get good grades for me to keep my job. And if I don't get good grades, I might not keep my job. I have to, for example, I've been working so hard on a paper since February. And I think I got it done yesterday to send to a journal, an academic journal. And they insist it must not be longer than 8,000 words. The text, not including the references and the title and the abstract, must not be longer than 8,000 words. So that 8,000 word limit, that's really hard to do, because you have to know exactly what you are trying to write, what you are trying to communicate, because you can't waste a lot of words, trying to figure out what you're trying to say by writing it down. So the word limit is useful because it helps me learn. I cannot go over 8,000 words, which means I have to be very focused and specific and have a thesis and supporting arguments and have a clear division and cutoff about what I will and will not talk about. It's because they put the word limit. If I didn't have a word limit, I would write, bleh, bleh, and I do. There are other places that don't have a word limit. I wrote a paper in April, May that's going to be published, and it's like 30,000 words. It's supposed to come out here. I'm waiting for it to come out. It's long. And I learned a lot, but, who's going to read it? Hopefully somebody will. So that's why the word limit is important, because you have to know exactly, every word has to count, which means you have to think through what exactly are your ideas and clarify them to yourself, which means you teach yourself. That's why we write. That's why I write. I learn when I write. I read books and I read articles and I read the news and I listen to reports, but then I have to write about them. And when I write about them, I learn. I develop new concepts. Okay? Yeah. Saturday, 7 o'clock. Yeah. And then on Saturday, I'll spend Saturday and Sunday. Yeah, I think, what did I say? in the assignment, the second and final draft. You know, the idea here is, you know, I write comments and you'll pay attention to the comments because you're writing the first draft. When I was a college student, professors didn't write comments. They wrote comments, but only when they were grading the paper. So you hand in the paper, first one draft, the professor writes comments and puts a grade on it. And I might read the comments once, but I really focus on the grade, right? But if you get to rewrite it, the comments are useful because you think about the comments. And so when you submit the second draft and final draft later this month, I will just put a grade on it. I won't write many, if any, comments because I already wrote the comments on the first draft. Okay? Uh-huh. I was going to try to do it on Zoom for everybody, unless you want to. But you know, I don't know. I mean, the university is, you know, they're trying to discourage. I mean, that's what I used to do. I used to have the students during the week 8 schedule meetings with me to come to my office and talk to me for half an hour. But we can do it on Zoom now, right? I can just contact you individually through Zoom and show you, you know, your paper and talk to you over the microphone. And you talk to me back. But so we'll try. So I'll post a file for you to on Google Docs to sign up for a time meeting with me on Zoom. Okay, so that's the organization side of the class. So back to the notes. Yeah. Sorry, can you say again? A Zoom what? Yeah, no, oh. I'm supposed to share the screen. You know, like I told you, this would be a lot easier if I could just do this. Is that share screen? That's share screen there? No, that's close. Is that share screen? Koreans. Is that share screen or end meeting? Don't want to touch that, right? This, oh yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. Because, you know, in my office, it's in English. Ta-da! Thank you. I mean, this is something new, right? I mean, it would be a lot easier if I could just take that laptop and plug it into the camera through the cable, but they tell me we can't do it. I got to use the office, the classroom computer. So, the U.S. Congress is not controlled by the president, so the Congress can obstruct the president if there are two different parties controlling the government. One controlling the president, the presidency, and one controlling one or both houses of Congress. And that was the case when Obama was president until Donald Trump was elected, until 2016. From 2010 to 2016, one of the Congress houses of the two houses was controlled by the Republicans, at least one. And Barack Obama was the president and he was a Democrat. And so the Congress would not come up with brilliant new strategies for advancing American interests. They would focus on blocking and obstructing Obama. And now, since 2018, the Democrats control the House of Representatives, not the Senate, but the House of Representatives under, does anybody know the name of the woman who's the Speaker of the House in the U.S.? She's a representative from San Francisco, the most liberal leftist area, one of the most liberal leftist areas in the United States. Her name's Nancy Pelosi, and she's in her 80s. And she represents San Francisco, which is a very leftist area. It's also the unofficial capital, and it's not a coincidence, it's leftist, of the gay community in the United States, right? And she is the Speaker of the House of Representatives, because she leads the Democratic Party in the House, because the Democratic Party controls most of the seats in the House. Most of the people in the House of Representatives are Democrats since 2018. And she tries to block and obstruct Trump as well. She, last year, led the effort to impeach and put on trial Donald Trump for his foreign policies in Ukraine, attempting to pressure the Ukrainian government to investigate falsely Joe Biden when he was vice president under Obama. So the House of Representatives impeached Donald Trump by a majority vote, and then the trial of Donald Trump went to the Senate, the second house of Congress, and he was found not guilty, because according to the Constitution, the Senate requires 2/3 majority vote to convict. So 2/3 of 100 is 67. Only, I think, 51 senators voted him guilty. So he was, and only one Republican in the Senate, Mitt Romney of Utah, voted for him to be guilty. And then almost immediately after that, the virus outbreak began in Italy, and then moving to United States. So that paused that process. And has that limited or restricted Donald Trump? After, I think immediately during this process is when he ordered the drone strike killing of Qasem Soleimani, the second most powerful person in Iran, even though he was being investigated and charged and put on trial by the US Senate, which shows it's difficult to stop a US president. If a US president really wants to do something, he can find a way to do it, including using military deadly force. And so the book covers what happened under President Obama when John Boehner was Speaker of the House, when the Republicans controlled the House of Representatives. I saw this man, what was it, 2 years ago? I went to a conference in October in the US, and I went to Incheon Airport, and I think it was 2 years ago. And this was during the semester, and I went to Incheon Airport, and I saw him. He was getting on my flight to the United States. Since he left the Congress, he's a lobbyist. He's making money as an advisor, political advisor and lobbyist. He's focused now on making marijuana legal and getting economic benefits from legalized cannabis marijuana in the United States. But when John Boehner brought Benjamin Netanyahu, the conservative leader of Israel, who's a close ally of Donald Trump, after Donald Trump became president, he more closely allied United States with Benjamin Netanyahu. He moved, as I said, the embassy of the United States from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and there has been talk about recognizing Israel's annexation of the West Bank. Now, this discussion is supposed to be about the Congress. We're always talking about the presidency. What can we do about the role of the Congress? What positive things can we say about the role of the U.S. Congress in limiting the overwhelming power of the U.S. president? And, if the president stereotypes, if the president sees diabolical enemies or degenerate opportunities, it's difficult to stop him from acting on it because he's occupying the office that is so powerful since 1940s. That's become so powerful since the 1940s. What can the US Congress do to promote complexity in thinking? Remember, the opposite of stereotyping is seeing complexity in what is driving Pyongyang's behavior. Is there politics in Pyongyang? Does Kim Jong-un have to worry about other political figures challenging him? Does he have to keep people happy? Is there limits to what he can do? Or is Kim Jong-un like God, that he can do whatever he wants? Probably not. Even Stalin could not do whatever he wanted. I remember my professor at Ohio State, Phil Stewart, gave us a lecture, and he told us how, for example, Stalin wanted to tear down, you know that famous church in Moscow that looks like a St. Vladimir's church with the onion domes and the many colors? I don't want to try to call it up. You know the famous, when you think of Moscow, you think of that famous church with all of the onion domes and the spires. I can call it up. Stalin wanted to tear it down. You know, we think about Stalin. Stalin is the most absolute dictator in the history of the world. He could do anything. He wanted to tear down St. Vladimir's. St. Basil's Cathedral, right? He wanted to tear it down. And the other members of the Politburo said, no, you can't do that. Yeah, this one. Thank you. He wanted to tear it down. He tore down other churches. And the other figures in the top leadership of the Communist Party said, no, you can't do that. And he said, okay. He wanted to move everybody who belonged to the Politburo, you know, the top party ruling body in the Communist Party, the political bureau, in short, Politburo. He wanted them, all of the members of the Politburo, to move to new houses he built so they all would live together in one section of one block area of Moscow. They said no. And they didn't. So the point is, even in brutal, vicious places like Stalin's Soviet Union or Hitler's Germany or Mussolini's Italy, there is politics. It's just the politics is vicious, bloody sometimes, but there's still politics. So what can the US Congress do to promote perceiving complexity among Americans and the American government towards, say, Muslims, towards Arabs, towards Palestinians? Are they all radical Islamist terrorists, jihadists who want to kill us Christians? Ah! That's how populists seeking votes talk in demagogic terms. What can the Congress do to promote understanding that Palestinian people, where Israel's located, they're human beings just like me, just like you. They have feelings, they have emotions. They're not all crazed Islamic jihadists wanting to go to heaven by strapping on a bomb and coming into this room and blowing you up. How can it promote that? Well, it can promote it partly by electing congressmen and women who are Palestinians and Muslims. So, go back to the lesson plan here. This person, these are two Muslim women in the US Congress. She's Palestinian and she was, it says, elected since 2019, the first Palestinian American, Muslim Palestinian American in the US Congress. She's in the House of Representatives, and there are 435 members of the House of Representatives. So she speaks and criticizes Donald Trump, and Donald Trump calls her and her other individuals who are also unusual, like this person. She is a Democrat from Minnesota, Ilhan Omar, another Democratic member of the House of Representatives, a Muslim, a religious one, who wears the hijab, covers her head. Somali American. She is her. She was born in. Oh no, she's naturalized. She was brought as a child. She was brought to the U.S. as a child by her parents from Somalia. America has had a lot of engagement in Somalia because of war there, and so she and Ilhan Omar are members of the so-called squad. These are radical, more leftist of center Democrats, socialists. She proudly proclaims herself to be a socialist. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She was born in U.S. And Barack Obama attacked them when they criticized, not Barack Obama, Donald Trump attacked them when Donald Trump was supporting Benjamin Netanyahu's policies. He attacked them and said, go back to where you came from, even though she was born in the U.S. Ilhan Omar was brought to the U.S. as a baby. And lots of immigrants come to the U.S. from different parts of the world, and where do they go to live? Like my father. My father was Italian, and he came to the United States around 1960. And he settled in Ohio, my home area in Ohio. Why did he settle in Ohio? He could have gone to Hollywood. He could have gone to Miami. He could have gone to New York, Broadway. Why did my dad choose Canton, Ohio, of all places? Because he had family there. Distant family. He had people from his village in Italy traditionally moved to that area in the U.S. to find jobs. That's why he moved there, because he knew people there, or he could rely upon people to help him who have a family or ancestry connection. That's why she's from Minnesota, because Somalis who've moved to the U.S. in the last 30, 40 years first went to some place like Minneapolis, Minnesota, and then later Somalis would go where there were other Somalis already there in America to get help. And they're heavily concentrated. This is the heaviest concentration of Somalis in America is in Minnesota. And she is the result partly of that immigration trend. And so this person speaks in the House of Representatives, condemns Israel's policies of annexation of the West Bank, calls for punishing Israel, calls for cutting back on American aid and assistance to Israel because Israel is violating Palestinian human rights. And she does that all the time. And it gets covered in the New York Times, in the news media. So there is a place for the Congress in providing a forum for minority views and non-typical views to get expression. They're not the first Muslims to join the U.S., to belong to the Congress. Keith Ellison is a man a black man, an African-American man, and he didn't change his name. Keith Ellison sounds English. He's Muslim, and he was a member of the Congress. Now he's Attorney General of the state of Minnesota, the top lawyer, prosecutor in Minnesota. So that's one function of the Congress in terms of promoting complexity and fighting stereotyping. Because again, nation states like America, like China, like Russia, like Japan, like France, nation states are more prone to stereotype. We talked about what is nationalistic behavior. I listed those 8 features. And so stereotyping means seeing the world in overly simplified, simplistic ways. Not seeing your adversaries as real human beings. Well, there she is. She's a real human being. And she gets interviewed on the television. And she gets reelected to office. Right? And that's important. And she faces death threats. She's a frequent critic of Israel. Omar has denounced its settlement policy and military campaigns in the occupied Western Palestinian territories, what she describes as the influence of pro-Israeli lobbies. And yeah, she was preceded by Keith Ellison, who is now he's a Muslim, and he's Attorney General of Minnesota, the state of Minnesota. And this person's Palestinian, and she supports the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign against Israel. Boycott Israeli products, divest companies, pressure companies who are investing in Israel to remove their investments in Israel and put sanctions on Israel for its persecution and oppression of the Palestinians. Remember, the U.S. gives $3.5 billion every year to Israel in military and economic aid. It's the biggest recipient and has always been, for many years, the biggest recipient of military and economic assistance from the United States. And the Congress has responsibility, constitutional authority to determine how to spend money. So the Congress approves that every year to give weapons and economic aid to Israel. And the claim is that Israel is oppressing the people that lived in Palestine before Israel was created. I mean, I'm an American, right? So I use my overly developed forebrain as a Homo sapiens. I attempt to use it to veto, to refuse to engage in stereotyping, and to not submit to the will of the herd that wants everybody to conform and obey the leader, right? But it's difficult. This is highly, highly controversial in the United States. Only 3.5% of the US population is Jewish, right? 15% are Hispanic, 13% are African American Black, only 3.5% are Jewish. But for them, Israel is a life and death issue. After what happened in Europe during the Holocaust, from their point of view, Israel is a life and death issue for them. And Jews, not all of them, but like Korean Americans, they tend to be highly educated, and they tend to have high status jobs, and they tend to have a lot of money. And they're really motivated about supporting Israel. So they hate this. They hate this boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign to punish Israel the way South Africa, before you were born, was punished for apartheid and oppressing the Africans in South Africa, the Black Africans in South Africa. So this is, speaking to you as an American, it's just, I'm even kind of afraid to talk about it all the time because I might get in trouble. People might see my Facebook posts when I post on Facebook announcements of BDS events. somebody's going to see it. They're going to report me. They're going to criticize me. They're going to contact the university administration and tell them, hey, you have a professor there who's anti-Semitic, who hates Jews. Like, if you oppose Israel, you hate Jews, as if that's true. That's not true, but that's what they were often equated. And if you're anti-Semitic, that makes you like Hitler. So if you're anti-Semitic, you're Hitler. Ah, I'm not Hitler. So this is really sensitive topic, particularly on universities, because so many young people are activists, and universities took the lead in boycotting South Africa under apartheid, and American university students are among the leaderships of this BDS movement towards Israel. But then there are a lot of students in America who are strongly supportive of Israel. You pay a price if you support this BDS movement. I mean, I saw it again and again and again among college professors, highly educated people fighting over Israel. So there's obviously an important role. She got reelected in the Democratic primary to represent her district for the Democrats because she's a Democrat, and she will probably be elected because it's a heavily Democratic area where that she's representing. But she was under opposition from this person. From this person. She was running. She had held that position, that congressional seat, under a special condition when the previous occupant, John Coiners, resigned because of sexual harassment allegations. She took his seat, and then she lost to Ilhan Tlaib, to that woman I just showed you, to become Congress representative for that district. And then she ran again against Tlaib in the elections this year for Democratic nominee for the 13th district of Michigan Congress district, the 13th congressional district of Michigan. And what I remember reading the New York Times, this district is heavily African American, black. She's black. Tlaib is Palestinian. She's not from, her ancestors are not from Africa, they're from the Middle East. And so a lot of advocates wanted her to be the congressional representative because this 13th district is overwhelmingly black, not Arab, black. And she lost, but the New York Times reported a lot of what's called dark money. There was a lot of money coming in to support her against Tlaib in the campaign. And they suspect, they argued it might well have been from the Israel lobby, that they wanted Tlaib out because Tlaib is an advocate for Palestinian rights in BDS. But she lost, and Tlaib won the Democratic Party nomination and will probably be reelected in 4 weeks to keep her job. Yeah, this is the 13th congressional district in Michigan. You can see it's in Detroit, a big city, heavily concentrated people, overwhelmingly African American. Look at that funky boundary. This is called gerrymandering. And I think this is worth talking about. It's not done so much in Europe, except in Britain. Any of you like horse races? You like horse racing? Let me show you a horse race. This system exists. These weird boundaries exist because of the American first past the post system. So let me see if I can find this here. What's the most popular or famous horse race in Korea? South Korea must have a horse race. What do they call it? Yeah? Spend a lot of money on it? I guess they do. The most famous one to us is the Kentucky Derby, right?
They're all in line. We're ready for the start. They're off in the Kentucky Derby. Authentic did not break on the lead here. Tis the Law is out quickly. Storm the Court is right there too with New York Traffic, and now Authentic is moving to their outside to be a part of the pace and now take over as they race by us for the first time. Authentic will make the front, but it was not easy to get there. Storm the Court is second on the inside. New York Traffic is third, and Tis the Law is right there fourth, moving into that turn. Then Enforceable, followed by a length and a half. New York turn. Attachment Rate is next, making his move now. And here he comes right up alongside of Authentic. A long shot, Mr. Big News, has made a big run up into third, and they're into the stretch. And it's Tis the Law on the outside of Authentic. These two stride for stride as they come to the final furlong. Authentic is dragging in. Tis the Law all up to get by him. Authentic and John Velasquez have the lead as they come down to the 16th bull. Tis the Law still trying to get him. Authentic, Tis the Law. Here's the buyer. Authentic has won.
So that's the victory post. So this horse won because it was the first past the post. The first past the post system refers to how in countries like the United States and in Britain that are descendants of Britain, like Australia, they elect people to represent their district according to who gets more votes than anybody else in that district. So if 10, let's say 5 different people, candidates are running for Congress, each gets 5%. Well, no, 10%, sorry. 20%, sorry. 20%. And one gets 19% of the votes, and another one gets 21%. So 20, 60, 79, 100%. This person is first past the post. So that's how Brenda Jones, that's how Clay first won her seat. That there were a number of people running for that seat 2 years ago, and Clay got more than anyone else, more votes than anyone else. So this person first past the post. It's also called plurality system. This person got a plurality of the votes in that congressional district, so they won. They didn't get a majority, they didn't get 51%. They got more than anyone else. And for this reason, it's at times easier for unusual people, from an American point of view, to get elected to office. Like Clay, she's Palestinian in a heavily black area. I mean, this is overwhelmingly African American here. And because there were a number of people running for the seat 2 years ago, Clay got more than anyone else and became representative of this area, and then did a really good job over 2 years, from 2018 to 2020, to keep these people happy and keep National Democratic Party figures happy. And then she got reelected in the Democratic primary against Brenda Jones, the black woman. So this is a feature of the plurality first past the post system. these boundaries are drawn for political purposes, right? This was purposefully drawn this way. Look at I mean, they don't have a nice just box or circle. They got this. Politicians drew this boundary for a number of reasons, including the fact that they wanted to have black people from Michigan in the U.S. Congress, because there had been a history of blocking black people from ever getting elected to U.S. Congress because white people wanted them down and out. So this has to be part of an explanation. This is called gerrymandering as to why unusual people belonging to groups that are described in bad ways by many in the media, they still can get in the U.S. Congress and promote complexity in worldviews, portray alternate points of view that are different. Because, you know, for so long, when I was a child, when I was a student, Israel was America's best friend in the Middle East. During the Cold War, remember the Cold War? Saddam Hussein was seen like Kim Il-sung in North Korea. Hafiz al-Assad was seen like Ho Chi Minh in North Vietnam. They were seen as Soviet agents working to spread Soviet imperialism in the Middle East. And their enemies, therefore, were our friends. And who are the enemies of Saddam Hussein and Hafiz al-Assad and other Arab nationalists? Israel. Israel is an enemy of Arab nationalists because Arab nationalists want to get rid of Israel. This country created by Jewish immigrants in the heartland of the Arab people at the expense of the Arabs living there. So Israel was America's best friend in the Middle East. Israel, 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 the Holocaust, the suffering of the Jews, the only democracy in the Middle East, the only one, really. We have to love Israel. Israel, we do know all Israel. Oh, yeah. I mean, we still read the New York Times. We're not, you know. What did the Palestinians do? Well, you know, the Jews suffer too much. They've suffered enough. Let somebody else suffer. And, you know, the Palestinians, they've got 30 Arab countries they can live in. There's all sorts of, so many Arab countries they could go live in. Can't the Jews have that one little piece of territory? That's my word. That's what I grew up with. Right? Especially during the Cold War. So, yeah, gerrymandering. This is a term used to describe how you draw an area, you draw your boundaries of your congressional districts in a first past the post system. Yeah, seriously, first past the post, right there, click there. In English-speaking world, United States, United Kingdom, Canada, India, and Pakistan still use it because they're heirs of the British Empire, like the United States. And this shows how this works, right? Let's say green people here are 40% of the population, and the yellow people are 60% of the population. If you draw the boundaries in such a way, these people, the yellow people always vote for yellow representatives, and the green people always vote for green representatives. You see what happens. You have 40% of the population is green. Divide that into 5 districts, you always get 5 yellow representatives. You draw the boundaries, you gerrymander the boundaries, in such a way that these people are always permanently in minority and never represented in the U.S. Congress. That's why we have those weird boundaries now, like in Michigan, in part to stop this. Black people tend to be concentrated in the north, like Ohio, Michigan, in cities, where they like to find jobs working in factories. you know, the term comes from the first commentary at the beginning of the United States, where I think it was named Jerry, who was a scientist in the U.S. Constitution. He's one of the founders of the U.S. Constitution. He drew this boundary, and somebody said, it's like a salamander, some kind of lizard, and mix it with Jerry, his name, and gerrymander. There were, as I said, there are positive elements to gerrymandering. As I said, if you look, you have to have African Americans in U.S. Congress. So we're going to draw the boundaries explicitly on purpose in such a way to make sure there are black members of Congress. We need that. But sometimes it produces unusual outcomes. Like I said, Rashid Tlaib is not black, she's Palestinian. And here are other gerrymandered districts. Look at this funky district in North Carolina. What about my district? My family lives here. So I'm in the 7th district. I voted in the election in the 7th district. And they drew the boundaries in such a way that Bob Gibbs, the Republican representative, he's not going to lose. Unless he does something ridiculous, he's never going to lose. But the justification is that, well, if you insist that we have to have black people, this is going to always, black people concentrated here, black people concentrated here. So, you know, and black people will almost always vote Democrat. So if you're going to insist that we have black representatives from Ohio in the U.S. House of Representatives, well, you're insisting that there are going to be Democratic seats. These seats will always be held by Democrats. Always. Because 90% of black people, 95% of black people always vote for the Democratic Party. So you're going to insist that these are automatic Democratic seats? Well, this would be an automatic Republican seat. And so they fight about this in the courts. I think there's only 2 black people from Ohio in Congress. Here are the representatives. One, yeah, that's her, Marcia Fudge. There was some talk that she might be Biden's vice presidential nominee, and I think there's one other. Oh, no, that's it. Only one. Yeah, that's it. Just one. This man is Donald Trump's strongest supporter. He may be Donald Trump's strongest supporter in the House of Representatives. And look at his district. This is overwhelmingly, it looks overwhelmingly like farmland. Farmlands and rich white suburbs, right? Few black people live here. Few black people live here. I bet you this is 90%, over 90% white, European American. Oh no, I think she's African American, but you know, light skinned. In Columbus, capital. Okay, I've talked a lot. You know, I try to explain things and I go on and on and on about it, and I'm just wondering if the Congress is even less popular than the president. Remember, the American system was set up on purpose to be difficult to function. The people that wrote the U.S. Constitution wrote the Constitution on purpose to make it difficult to do anything. Remember, they were suspicious of powerful central government represented by the King of Britain. And as a result, the U.S. federal government doesn't do as much as, say, Emmanuel Macron. What did he do recently? He forced through a change in the pension system in France. You can't do that in the US. It's purposefully set up. Macron exploited what de Gaulle gave him. De Gaulle set up a system where de Gaulle could do what de Gaulle thought needed to be done to stabilize France in the late 1950s, when he became president in 58, right? When France was on the verge of civil war over Algeria and other issues. US President Donald Trump attempts to act like de Gaulle, but he can't yet do it. And so the result is 240 years later, we have a modern economy that produces thousands of billions of dollars of output with vast military and military bases all over the planet Earth with millions of personnel. It requires more government action to monitor and guide this vast, complicated organization called the United States. But it's very difficult for leaders of the United States to do that. And so the result is, one of the results is that Americans are unhappy with their government. They're unhappy with their government because they think the government is not able to act decisively. And it's really not. Only in rare situations can the US government act decisively. Wartime. Wartime. Maybe the pandemic. If this escalates and Donald Trump is sick and the economy goes into depression, when there's an overwhelming election outcome in which one party controls the Senate, the House of Representatives, and the presidency, but that doesn't happen often. The most recent time was under Donald Trump from 2016 to 2018, and before Donald Trump, it was under Barack Obama, 2008 to 2010. It doesn't typically happen when one other different party controls even just one house of Congress. Strong central government legislation stops. And it was set up that way. And so, since most Americans don't study the history of the United States and don't talk about gerrymandering and first past the post and boycott, divest, and sanctions and Cold War and evil empire and diabolical enemy, and they just see that we're suffering and nothing is being done. And so the Congress is even less popular than the president, typically. And politicians know this in America. At the same time, even as Congress is less and less popular, according to public opinion surveys, around 95%, 90 to 95% of men and women in the US Congress get reelected. Despite this downward trend in favorable opinions about the US Congress, over 90% of the 535 members of Congress get reelected every 2 years. Over 90%. And they get reelected because they focus on satisfying individuals in their congressional district who say, hey, I'm having trouble getting my Social Security, pension, disability benefits from the government. Would you please help me? Constituency services. I benefited from that. The IRS, a year ago, here in Korea, sent me a letter. They said, hey, Ben, you owe us $3,000. You underpaid your taxes by $3,000, and you have to send it now. And I said, what? I owe you $3,000. Oh my God. Oh. got on the phone, 13-hour time difference between Korea and Washington, getting on waiting in the line. And they were wrong. They made a mistake. But it was only fixed when I contacted Bob Gibbs, my congressman. I sent him a letter, and I was contacted by 2 people in his office as to what the problem was. I filled out a form. They contacted me again to find out if I was had gotten feedback, and they fixed the problem. I got the money back. Constituency services. The point I'm making in terms of this class, these men and women who get reelected, they don't keep their jobs because of foreign policy questions. Foreign policy is not a popular concern with most members of Congress. They know to keep their jobs and get reelected, they have to focus upon the immediate needs of their voters in their district, in the 13th District of Michigan, or in the 7th District of Ohio, people like me who ask for help, who ask for guidance. They typically don't comment much at all about foreign policy. Some do, but Rashid Tlaib made sure she knows everything I'm telling you. She complained about Israel's treatment of the Palestinians, but she went back to her district every week to talk with her constituents, to satisfy their needs, because she knows what I'm telling you. She's not keeping her job because she's standing up to Israel. She's keeping her job because she is working for the voters, African-American voters in the 13th District of Michigan. There are a lot of African-American intellectuals in particular who care about Israel, right? Who care about the Palestinians, who say Palestinians are people of color like us, and people of color, brown, black, are abused by imperialism. Yeah, but those tend to be intellectuals, students, professors, not your typical voter in the 13th District of Michigan. So remember, most Americans just don't think very much about foreign policy. Maybe you Koreans do, partly because 70% of the Korean economy depends upon trade, right? So let's do an exercise. Ready to use your Zoom laptops? Let's see how this works here, polling. So it says, this is the question. Can you see this? Yes. In the US democratic political system, American foreign policy should reflect the preferences of the American public. Do you strongly agree, neutral, cannot decide? Yes, or disagree or strongly disagree? Yes? Why not? Oh, no. See, yeah, like I said, is this it? Is this the waiting room? Yeah, what I wanted to do was disable the waiting room. Okay, which one is accept? This one? This one? This? This? Accept everybody? Oh, I'm sorry you weren't accepted. Is everybody accepted now? Yes. Here, this is enable. This is here. Another reason why to do this in English, because in English, I do that automatically in my office. I disable the waiting room so you automatically enter the class. But since they insist I use the classroom computer, and it's in Korean, and I don't know the vocabulary for, disable waiting room. So now I know. Okay, but like I said, that's why this worked better in my office, because it's all in English on my laptop there. All right. So I'm sorry about that. All right, so okay, so launch the poll. Ready, set, go. Should American foreign policy reflect the preferences of the American public? Eight of 12, 9 of 11, sorry. Two more. Now, oh, that's it. Okay, so I guess now release the poll. Okay, so you see it says Kyo Kongyu. What does that mean? Close the poll or release it? Okay, share. Okay, there, I'm sharing with you. You can already see it, right? So those of you who disagree, isn't democracy about the government reflecting, representing the will of the people? But some of you, a lot of you say no. Why? Why do you say no? I mean, okay, let's form a breakout rooms. Explain your answer. Explain your answer. So now we close that. This one is stop. Right? Click here. No, what? No, maybe not. Okay, so let's go back to, is that breakout rooms? I don't see breakout rooms. Is that breakout rooms down there at the bottom, right here? No. Where is it? Breakout rooms. They don't have breakout rooms? You know how I divided you up into groups from my office? I don't see, it doesn't say, it's like blocked. What's Dobuki?
Oh yeah, right there.
This one?
Yeah.
This will form into breakout rooms? Okay, so let's see how many people are here. Let's form 4 groups. And ready? So these are your, oh, maybe I shouldn't have formed into 4 groups. There's not enough people here. Oh, no, we're okay. Okay, so those are your groups. So describe, come to a group decision. So could you please stand up and get into these groups? And this person is the chair. This person is the chair, this person is the chair, and this person is the chair. And could you come to a decision about your position on whether or not U.S. foreign policy should reflect the preferences of the American people? And where, as a group, do you come to on that position? And explain your group. Could you do that, please? So could you please move into, find that other person who's in your group. I also want you to get to know each other. Is that group too small? Nah, that's okay. So, get to know each other. Ideally, that's why you're meeting face to face. That's why we're meeting here in class, so that you can have some interaction with each other. So some of these are 2 people, some are 3 people. Ho Ryong is not here. She's relocating. So Yung Lim and Song Chun Moon, you're okay. That's you. Chung Sung Hyun, Kim Hyun Chul, Melis Juvin. Where's Melis? I want to get to know who's Melis Juvin. Okay, who's Yi Sang Moon? Okay, who is Song Hoon Om? Okay, and Subin Ju. Where's Subin? Okay. So come to a position on that statement. So I think I have it as a separate file here. Yeah. So, yeah. So the next person on the list, go ahead and be the chair. And I'm just looking to see where I can find, I thought I had that set up here.
Click the blue button.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I set you into the groups. Okay, so there we go.
So, what are you doing?
Come to a position on whether or not you think that the U.S. Foreign policy should reflect the preferences of the American public. And I thought I had that set up also as a file here, but I don't see it. Maybe I didn't. Okay. I thought I could just show it. Yeah, that's it. Do you agree, strongly agree? What's your position as a group? And explain your answer. So I noticed that the clock. Okay, so 1 minute. That clock is 6 minutes slow. So now I know. I thought I was using that clock in the back of the room, and that clock in the back is 5 minutes slow. Okay. So, there's no right or wrong answer here. And so, E, minus equals catch a rabbit, minus so 50 power 7 go, E minus oh. Okay. So, what did your group decide? Go ahead. Didn't do that when I was. Speaker testing.
Testing.
Okay, so I think I messed around with it. So what did you decide?
Agree to reflect the preference of the American public. Yeah, so our group discussed that we were on the side of we should reflect the preference of the American publics while discussing democratic political system. So our basic idea was that so the whole policy making actually comes from constitutions and also and also the executive branch, which it completely relates. They both of them has a great connections, and although the presidential power is much more related to like war decisions or other political importance decisions, but however, our idea is that since the Congress is also the representative of public perspectives, so both of the cooperations actually really has to put into the ideas, and mostly the head of the representatives are the ones who speaks for the public, and I guess that's most of the reason why um, the the public's preference should be into.
Or at least they believe, that those preferences are being reflected because of the complicated process you described. Who was chair? Okay. What did your group decide?
So we also agreed on the fact that the U.S. head of state should reflect the people's opinion, and so because the U.S. people elected the president, it should reflect the people's opinion in the foreign policy.
Yeah, I mean, you can't deny and refuse to reflect the will of the American people, right? If you openly appear to reject the views of the American people, you're in big trouble as a politician, right? You at least have to claim to reflect the core of the group. Like Donald Trump, he told Rashid Tlaib and Alexander Ocasio-Cortez and Alia Presley and what was the other one? Ilhan Omar. She said, "Go back to where you came from." In other words, you're not real Americans. I need to reflect your points of view. I reflect the core Americans, the people that founded America, the people that wrote the Constitution, white Christian Americans. He's open about that. Donald Trump is openly appealing to white Christian European Americans. We are the ones that made America great, not you Africans, not you Hispanics, but people who wrote the Constitution. Yes.
Yeah. So we just went really simple because I was kind of like indecisive. So what we came to what we said was the American citizens, they elected Trump, and from that, it's not really, can you really trust the majority, their judgment? I mean, just simply put like that.
Yeah, Hitler was incredibly popular until the war started and they started losing. If he had bothered to have an election in 1939, Hitler would have won in a landslide. Mussolini was incredibly popular until World War II started. Who's your chair? I can't, the cord won't reach any further. Ooh.
Thank you. So the politics must respect the willingness of the people who elect the politician. It's just a democracy, you know. But in the case of America, the American take more interesting on domestic politics. The American vote for Trump because of the American first. But the American citizen opinion and political culture must be focused on American foreign policy because America have important place in the world, and without this role, the country can become more isolated and less powerful. It's our opinion.
Okay. Sounds like, in other words, it reflects the will of the American people as long as the American people keep electing and re-electing these people, right? Yeah, of course Americans don't pay close attention to foreign policy, but they don't care. But if you make them care, probably you make them care because there's a disaster. You start a war. So don't provoke them. by a disaster. Okay, so that's it for today. So could you please hand in your papers with your names on them, that you wrote down your comments and ideas? Yeah, I mean, you know, the statements that you just made, I should have mentioned that that's typically, you know, what we do. So yeah, if you could write down on your names, make sure you put, I should have told you to do that. You put a piece, jot down your ideas with your names, and I give you participation credit. So, yeah, whose pen is this? This is mine. Thank you very much. So, yeah, I typically ask people to sign in. Although, you know, we also do smart attendance. You know, this is first time we've used Zoom here at Catholic University of Korea. So,